Hello, hello. This is Allie Decker, and you're listening to the Long Game Podcast. In this episode, I'm talking to Sean Blanda. Sean is the director of content at Crossbeam, a partner ecosystem platform that helps companies securely exchange data when partnering. People use Crossbeam for real-time account mapping, sourcing leads, and vetting co-marketing opportunities. Sean is particularly passionate about content that builds communities and brings people together. He started his career at Envision, became director and editor-in-chief at 99U, the think tank of Adobe's Behance, and collaborated with Ramit Sethi on I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Sean is also the founder of Pilcrow House, an event series based in Philadelphia where he lives. Join us for a conversation about how Sean is scaling his content team at Crossbeam and how being a director of content isn't that much different from SNL's Lorne Michaels. Without further ado, here's Sean Blanda. We'll go ahead and get started with a pretty high-level question here. What has your content journey looked like?
My career journey, like to get where I am now, yeah.
Career, yes, but more as it pertains to content.
I think, so I graduated college in 2008, which was a terrible time. With a journalism degree, it was a terrible degree and a terrible time to graduate. So I started a news website with two of my friends here in Philly called Technically Philly that covered tech and VC and startups. So started that with a very journalistic end goal. And then one of the ways we made money was events. So I started getting really into planning events and gathering communities. And then my next job after, I was like, I want to get really good at events. I got this writing thing. Okay, let me get to events. And then I joined Behance, which was acquired by Adobe. And that's the moment I ventured into content marketing. I just didn't quite realize that's what it was called, or I'm not even sure.
Okay.
But it was using the written word and content to gather communities to do a thing. And that was very interesting to me. And that's how I feel.
So when you say written word, because Behance isn't it a design site?
It is, right? But it had this component, this think tank called 99U. It used to be called the 99%, and it was renamed 99U. And that had magazine, book, events, blog. So what did you do for them how did you marry writing and events? Where did those two overlap? I think events are content. So it's the event. The writing helps get people to understand your brand and what you're about and the community of people who are interested in the same thing. In 99U's case, it was about idea execution and creativity, and then giving them a IRL place to gather every year. To me, it's just an extension of publishing. Yeah, we've had lots of conversations about the value of IRL, especially after this past year. So how has that impacted where you are today? What happened after that? The very brief version, and I'm happy to go into any sort of. Let's go brief to start. Yeah, I left Behance, and it was acquired by Adobe. So I left Adobe in 2016. I got married, and we did a 6-month honeymoon around the world, which was super exciting. And then when I came back, I worked for Ramit Sethi, who is a personal finance author, runs an empire called I Will Teach You to Be Rich. Did that. And then I moved to work for Envision, which makes design tools, being the director of editorial there. And now I work at Crossbeam, which is a Philly startup. So it seems like you've jumped around industries. How has that impacted, if at all, your content career? Have you found that you've had to relearn industries as a content contributor, or has it really impacted it at all? It made me realize what was unique to the community and what's unique to content. So, for example, the way you talk, right now I talk mostly to sales and biz dev professionals, and that's different than talking to designers, much different. So there's different ways of approaching that. But for example, they still want to get together in person. They still want to learn career advice. They still want to learn from each other, right? There's some basic truths. And that journey has helped me figure out what I think is true for most any community versus what is unique to a specific community. So your content is always community driven. It's less about product. Yeah. I am usually the tippy top of the funnel, tip of the spear, get people to hear, every brand stands for something and wants to attract a certain kind of person. And I usually do that rather than the down funnel stuff. Though I occasionally do, but not stuff. Yeah.
Gotcha. So where would you say your career content started interacting with marketing?
It's never a part. Like, yeah, it's, I mean, content is marketing, and even journalism is marketing, even if journalists don't want to admit that to themselves. And I think they're very intertwined. I would say the difference is good content marketing doesn't lead with the thing it's marketing. Like, it leads with the thing that is most useful to the kind of person who could enjoy the product. And that's a different way of approaching it than some people.
Yeah, I think so. So I was reading on your site, you wrote a piece about what you wish you knew 5 years ago. And it's something I wish I knew 5 years ago as well, because I'm going on about 6 or 7 years in content. Mm-hmm. And you write about building a career in content and how important it is to cultivate your own opinion, have a point of view, all that stuff, which is pretty basic, right?
Yeah.
You think. But there's this theme now with leveraging other people's opinions, other people's points of view, other people's experience, mostly through podcasts, right? What we're doing today. How would you encourage someone to balance those two things, those two approaches to content? Obviously they both play a role. They're both valuable, but how would you encourage someone to like leverage both without forsaking one or the other?
I don't think you need to, the opinion or your opinion or your worldview or the way you want the world to change should color the kinds of people you reach out to and what you ask them. I think you should always lead with the voices of others, because people reading your site or going to your event, like, they've already opted into the way you think. They don't need to hear it again. Like, instead, you should be providing a platform for other supporting discussion. And also, as a content marketer, you don't know all the things you think you know. So get the community to reflect it back to you. They know more than you. So I would say every company has like founding values or the thing it's trying to change, right? Maybe you work for a company that wants to encourage remote work. So like that's the opinion in which you would then go to market with. And that is how you would source other inputs, whether people agree or disagree or want to teach you how to do that better or a new way of doing it. Like, that's the lens in which you can exist. But if you don't make that lens for yourself, you'll be all over the place.
It's like more of a generalist.
Yeah. And
opinion generalist.
Well, but it would also be like, it'll be boring for the reader, because they need to know where you're trying to lead them in a certain way. It's like,
what the point is. Yeah.
Especially
today.
Yeah. And like, general interest stuff doesn't exist anymore, right? Like, you need to be so hyper specific of the thing you're talking about, and then where you want that specific niche to go in the future. Like, I think those two things need to be pretty clear from the brand.
Right. And that should color any and everybody you include from outside.
Yeah. Because otherwise I think people don't do that hard work and they end up chasing something like keywords or something instead. And that's why you get all this like mealy mouth, mushy, not quite interesting to read stuff out there.
So for folks that are like leading a content team, where should they go to establish those initial opinions? Their leadership, the founders of the company?
Yeah, I mean, every company should have its values in the
what you think, yeah.
Yeah, and like, if they don't, that's a bigger problem that you should help lead. And actually, I've been at companies where we do that, where we're like, by virtue of making like an editorial strategy, you ask some pretty tough questions, like, who are we targeting? What do they care about? What do we want them to know about us? It has to be one thing. It can't be 10 things. And like, sometimes you can force that value discussion for a smaller company. But yeah, you need those values. A thing I try to do at every job I get to is write almost like a 2-page brief. I'm like, this is what I see the company's values. Here's the person I think we're trying to target at the top of the funnel. Here are the things I think they care about. Here are a few like pillars or strategies or campaigns we're going to roll out with. And here's how we know it'll work. And like, getting that all foundationally set before you even write the first thing is extremely important.
Yeah, I would think that would color a lot of your initial strategy research too.
And it also makes arguments happen sooner, right? Like, maybe you bring it to leadership and you're like, we're targeting junior designers. And they're like, no, absolutely not. The people that buy us are senior. Like, cool. Have that friction early rather than writing a series of 10 things for junior designers and them saying, who is this for?
Yeah. So let's dig a little bit more into content leadership, your experience with that. You're currently at Crossbeam, right? Mm-hmm. Tell me about Crossbeam's content culture.
content culture, as in what it's like to work on the team?
Let's start with like people culture, and then we'll go into all the different content channels and how it all impacts, the bottom line.
Yeah. So we're a small but mighty team of 4 in a company of 60. And it's always weird to describe the culture you're in charge of, because in reality, the people living it are probably more qualified. But the thing I aspire to is being very journalistic and community focused. So constantly talking and interviewing people in the space and the kinds of readers we want to attract, always have an open line of communication, learning what they're seeing and what they care about and reflecting that back. That's the most important kind of loop. And when it comes down to the creation of things, we try to cultivate like a writer's room vibe where like people can throw out ideas, you yes and it, you offer different angles. I know content marketing can feel very rote and boring, especially if it's a boring topic. So giving people and myself the freedom to experiment and try things and new ways of talking to the audience, I think is really important.
So what is your team measured on, and how do you marry the less metric driven values with that?
Yeah. I mean, the eternal question.
Right.
The things we're constantly measured on are, yes, traffic, but that's not like the hard line. And 2 would be email addresses and leads capture. Like how many people raise their hands that were interested in what to say. And third, I said 2, but it's 3. The third is there's a particular phase in our product journey that we know people tend to stick around in the product, and we measure how many of those people that get to that step have consumed a piece of content, and we want that percentage to be a certain number. So X% of people who reach this step in the product have read content.
Gotcha. And what percentage of your content ideas, not just blog, but like overall content ideas, come from that data versus your writer's room brainstorm sessions?
I would say 90% come from the kind of writer's room.
Okay.
Mentality. Yeah, because the data should support what the community is saying, right? So
gotcha.
As an example, the community said to us time and time again, I feel lost. There's no roadmap for this job. I don't see a lot of guides out there. I'm kind of stabbing in the dark. I don't know how much to pay people I hire. I got nothing. So that tells me I need to go pull the data of salary information for this group, or I should put in a survey about common struggles so we can then write the content that caters to them. Everything is led by what the audience is telling us.
Gotcha. So you play more off qualitative data than quantitative.
You start, it has to end in something quantitative.
Right.
But I think, in the same way, you ever log on to pick your social media platform, Instagram, Twitter, Spotify, whatever, and you get in an algorithmic corner. You're oh, Spotify keeps recommending the same 3 artists to me. I feel like whenever you are too reliant on data for content, that's what happens. You end up writing it.
Parses down.
Yeah. You end up only looking at what 3 inches in front of you and not the whole map.
Yeah, no, I would definitely agree with that. So what is your biggest challenge then as head of content at Crossbeam?
Our biggest challenge that's a great question.
What's your biggest challenge?
Yeah, my biggest challenge is continuing. So this particular space, the people we talk to are in business development and partnerships and sales. And that can get incredibly wonky and weird. And at times very process driven and when done incorrectly, tedious. And my biggest challenge is finding interesting ways to surface very important information to the audience without getting mired in minutia or boring corporate businessy jargon talk. Making it fun and interesting and cool, and the way that stays interesting is you are interested. So making sure that feedback loop is very tight, because it's very easy to just get down some corner of boring process stuff.
So how do you stay interested in something that might not be your biggest passion?
I love writing things for communities, and to me, this is a community. So constantly checking in with them. And I think at the end of the day, every B2B SaaS publication is a career advice publication. People who are in this business, how do they advance in their career? And I love writing that stuff. So whenever people vocalize what a barrier would be, someone might say, I have a lot of trouble convincing my sales team to get the time of day for me. Cool. Everyone we talk to for the next 2 weeks, I'll ask them that question. How do you do it? and we'll put that together and put it on the market. And usually that feedback loop is strong when people like it, and then they give us more information, and then we kind of so that is what keeps me engaged.
Gotcha. So you said earlier that you live mostly at the top of the funnel. Where and how do you work with, sales or product to develop more middle and bottom of the funnel? If at all?
We do. It's fairly new in our Crossbeam. So we don't have I can't say we have this system and we figured it out. But what I can say is that the brand experience should match. So the way the content group pulls you in, or if the content group pulls you in, it shouldn't feel like a jarring transition when you start doing stuff. Conversely, there's elements about our top of funnel stuff that people like that we can infuse in the bottom of funnel as well. So that, and then the other thing, product marketing saying, this is really important. Our users, once they learn about this, really like this. How can we start sprinkling that in the top of funnel stuff so it's not a shock or it's not coming out of left field when they finally get down? Gotcha.
So do you have regular meetups, or is this more of an ad hoc basis that you have these conversations?
We're small enough that it's pretty ad hoc. What's coming up, let's touch base. I also think in many software businesses, the content team is essentially like an in-house creative studio.
Yeah.
And I try to treat it that way when internally they're our client and say, we're launching thing. This is why we think it's important. And we can say, all right, here's how we think we should execute it. And then we work together to do it.
Can you explain more about that content studio theory? Is that something you've always believed, or is that something that came up in a certain role?
No, it's something, it actually came up when I worked at Envision. Envision's 1,000 people, remote company, very large marketing team. We realized that it's always immediately fulfilling to handle internal requests rather than go out and talk to people externally. You can get very easily mired in just people asking you for designs, for copy, for blog posts. And you could do that all live long day, but I don't think you'll advance your career and your team in the company by doing that. So I always found it good to separate it and say, this is internal work and this is external work. And the way in which that's separated can be your team. You can have people that only work on an internal and external. It can be by hours during the week, we're dedicating 100 man hours a week to this, and that's it. You have to box it down to help you prioritize, and also to make sure you keep doing the more important but not urgent work you need to do to grow a content team.
Gotcha. So leaning more into your leadership role, how do you manage expectations from higher ups?
A lot of communication. I think it's about. I think I would say that the best thing is have all the fights early and have all the discussion early.
You said
be really candid about we're going to do this quarter and we're going to do this next quarter and this is how we're going to be measured as everyone. Right. If you don't have a quarterly plan and then a yearly plan for your team and your executive team hasn't signed off on it, you're just asking for misunderstandings and things not to go right. The other thing is our CEO, Bob Moore, is well-versed and extremely smart in this space. And I lean on him as a writer and I lean on him as a subject matter expert when coming up with campaigns. So he's very involved in our marketing efforts in a very positive way. So it's rare that, or if ever, I don't surprise him and shock him with something. He's in the room when we talk about this stuff.
So it seems like he understands the balance when it comes to content between the creative and the data-driven.
Yeah, 100%.
What would you say to someone who's leading up a content team who doesn't have a leadership team above them that understands that balance?
The thing that I've seen work is ask them what their favorite content arms are. They might be like, oh, I really love how Stripe does it, or I love it how Adobe does it, or whatever. Just pick your company that they have in their mind that they want. And then you'll be able to prove that see that piece they wrote that you liked, that's just for conversation. That's qualitative because their audience is asking for it. There's no keyword attached to that. They're not pulling a bunch of data from their apps. They're just writing something that they think the audience would like, and you are the audience, and that's why you like it, right? You got to make people understand that when they're on the other side of the equation, when they are reading something, when they are going to an event, they want that less data back stuff often.
Right. So how do you work out content marketing budgets? It's you don't have to give me numbers, obviously, but how do you split it between all your projects, all your initiatives?
The glib answer is impact, right? Whatever gets more impact is more budget. But I think we're still early. So I'm in year 2 in this job, and this company's only 3 years old, and we're still growing. So I'm a big like fail fast person. Like we will flood something with what is a large percent of our budget quickly, but the moment I don't see the signals from it, I cut it back immediately. That could be paid. That could be paying for a service or software. It could be hosting, paying for an event or other activation. I think we're right now in a very exploring phase right now, which is exciting, but means it's hard for me to answer your question about
That's fine. That's a question I wrote down because it's something I'm personally very curious about. When you say that, Crossbeam's growing, what does that look like for you right now?
We're 60, and a year ago we were 22. We raised the Series B in August. And I mean, this is pretty standard, I think, in startups. But right now, the investment activity is incredibly hot. Things are growing incredibly quickly. IPOs are happening every day. It's a really exciting time to be in SaaS, and I don't think we're any exception. One thing that's cool about working here is we're a network effect business. So the more people that join Crossbeam, the more valuable it is to everybody. And as a result, that tends to have some nice looking charts where they look exponential as more people join and more people get value. It compounds. So that accelerates alongside with our headcount, alongside with our user numbers, alongside everything else often. Yeah.
And you said your content team is growing as well.
Yeah. So we're 4 and we're looking to be 5 and maybe even 6. Right now we're hiring right now being mid to late July 2021, hiring a content marketing manager. And then keep an eye on our careers page. There'll be a few more roles.
Gotcha. So this is my last question as it pertains to your role as head of content. What channels do you own? What are all the projects going on at Crossbeam right now?
From a marketing perspective?
That pertain to your role.
Yes. So big one, bread and butter, and my favorite is the blog. I think that's everything germinates from what we write on the blog. That's our main way of talking to people and distilling down the insights and learning about it, and the main way of testing, do things go well. I'm a big fan. You should only focus on 1, maybe 2 distribution channels at first. And the one we have focused on is email. So we have around 25,000 email subscribers to our weekly newsletter, which is all advice on partnerships and business development. And we've since kind of expanded out to a little bit of social, mostly LinkedIn, where we do SEO work slowly as like a part of what we do, but that is not the driving part of the strategy. And then now that events are a thing again, we're doing IRL events. I have a few of those coming up. And then digital events, webinars, and things like that.
That's exciting. So let's pull back. And I have a couple questions for you personally. It seems like you have a very creative background, starting as a writer. How do you balance your creative output, things that you want to create, with pouring that energy into your team and helping them do the same?
I think they're both creative acts. I equate it to hosting a dinner party. So when you host a dinner party, you shouldn't be the star of the dinner party. Your job is to make sure everyone else is having a good time. And a success is that people leave there and go, I met a few people, I had a great time, I would love to come back, right? That the success has nothing to do with whether you were the star of the show or whether you were listened to or whether people were paying attention to you. That is, I think, what running a good team is like, where the success of your team and the outputs of your team should be creatively fulfilling if you were. And if they're not, that's very hard. And you either have to balance it with your own creative work or realize that maybe it's not the right fit for you. A flip would be like, I always envy, do you watch SNL?
I love SNL.
Right. I always envy the career of Lorne Michaels because everyone knows who he is. He's rarely on camera. But he has been responsible for the careers of, call it, hundreds of movie stars, comedians, people in our culture. He's a creative success, even if he's not in front of the camera, right? That's the kind of dynamic I think a good head of content does. They create an environment in which the people below them can be superstars and successful. And sometimes that means they actually leave your team as a result, but that's okay. That's what you should be encouraging.
So going back to the SNL example, if someone started on stage and then they were given the opportunity to take Lorne's shoes, no one can top Lorne, but let's say they were really good and someone wanted them backstage. And they were passionate about both, but, they were having a hard time stepping out of the spotlight. They enjoyed that. They loved that work, that, granular execution. Yeah. What would you say to them?
What? You just gave me reasons you like writing, but you didn't give me reasons why you would like managing, and then you
passionate about both. You're passionate about writing. You're passionate about strategy. You're passionate about expanding into more of that journalistic impact on the bottom line, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the career of a lot of content strategists, journalists, even going from paper to people. How does that look, and what would you say to them?
Yeah, it's do you care more about the craft or do you care more about the impact? Which I think is different, right? Like you will have a greater impact in most cases, right? Being a manager or a leader, because you can kind of scale your knowledge by teaching other people. But like the craft of writing, podcasting, videoing, you'll be less involved in. You can help other people, but you'll be less involved in. And like that needs to be a fulfilling trade.
Yeah.
I think some people would say, yeah, the impact's important, but the thing I love is just sitting down on my laptop, blocking everything out, and just writing for 3 hours. Like I enjoy that. I Zen. I am so happy when that happens, and I want nothing else. Like you should be honest with yourself. But some people are writing for a reason. Like, yeah, I like writing, but the reason I'm writing is I want people to know about the thing, or I want to change the world in this way. If that's the way you think about it, I think you're well suited to be a manager.
Gotcha. So how was that transition like for you?
It was when I worked at Adobe. I came in as like the associate editor, which was bottom of the totem pole. Right. And by the end, I was the director, in which I had direct reports. And the way I thought about it is it's kind of like you rent a house for a while and you get the idea of how you would rearrange your perfect house, and you're watching HGTV and you're like, man, if I had my own house, I would do it this way. And then someone just gives you the chance to build your own house. And like, that is exciting and extremely creative for film. So I view it as that, like it's a chance to spin it up or change this thing, which I've been staring at. That's how I thought about it. That's how I continue to think about it. And that's one reason I love working at Crossbeam. Was obviously first content hire. So I could help guide the initial strategy and not, I'm not moving into someone else's house and building that house.
Right. That's exciting. But, taking a look at some of your other projects, it seems like you do satisfy that writing urge elsewhere, right?
Yeah, I think that's important to me, and also like it's important for like thinking, right? Like writing is thinking, so the more you write, the clearer you get thinking, and also for like this is odd to say, but like legacy reasons, like the things we write can outlive us or live for a long time, and that's appealing to me as well. Because I can manage all the live long day, but that stuff is a little more transient and not permanent as putting a piece of creative work into the world, putting your name on it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very true. So what are
also, you need skin in the game, right? Like you can't be advising people to write and like not write.
Yeah, I agree. Even if it's not, on the Crossbeam blog, you're still getting your feet wet.
And if you're editing, you should occasionally have someone else edit you, so you remember to treat your writers with grace and respect and empathy, because sometimes I think people lose sight of that.
So do you have someone that edits your personal blog?
Actually, no, but until this is around, I should get back on it. I would freelance pitch things and have people give me feedback to kind of like, one, just for funsies, but two, I remember I pitched a national publication and I was like, this will be fine. There'll be no edits. And the woman editing me like dressed me down and like tore it apart. Oh, and it was like, at first my ego got in the way and I was like, oh no, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And I thought, I was like, no, this is a gift. Because I can finally like get a reminder that, you don't know everything, you idiot.
Right.
And it was good. I recommend that.
Yeah, that's hilarious. What are your top 2 favorite projects right now that you're working on?
2 things. One is the return of in real life events. I am very, very, very excited. I am not a big fan of digital events or remote work necessarily, and I love being in the room with people. Very excited to do that. We're going to announce a few things coming soon. And then the other thing is, one thing that our audience talks about all the time, like I said, is not having a good guide for building their partnership program. And we are making a diagnostic tool in which people can take a short quiz and get recommendations based on their answers on how to advance their partner program. Leaning on the 2 years of Crossbeam insights and data and survey results we have, start to build a model where we can like almost, walk people along almost like a course or a test or a path. This is the first step and we're excited to release it.
That's awesome. I love quizzes.
Yeah, it reminds me of, I always pitch it as, it's like the what Disney princess are you quiz for BuzzFeed, but it's like our industry.
I feel like if BuzzFeed had like a conversion flow for something, they would have insane rates if like they had their email gated under all their quizzes, because everyone always finishes them all the way through. Well, that's all I have for us today. Thank you for joining. I'd love to hear, if there's anything you want to share with our audience, contact information, any announcements or anything like that. That's usually what we close on.
Sure. I'm Sean Blanda, SEAN, on Twitter. Would love for you to reach out to me if you nerd out about this stuff. But if you go to crossbeam.com and scroll all the way to the About Our Career section, you'll see we are, have a few open recs in this department, and hopefully we'll have more soon. Would love to hear from you regardless, whether you're looking for a job or not. I think this is such a burgeoning kind of worker and class of creative person. And we should all know each other. We should all connect. It's the rare example, like we're not in competition with each other despite doing the same thing often. And that's like I think it's a beautiful thing. We should take advantage of it.
Yeah, it's rare. Awesome. Well, thank you.